And that's just a start, Daniel. We have appreciated everything that you have done for the district, what you're going to do between now and June 30th, but a lot of people don't know a little bit about the background, and I'm going to have to indulge them for just a little bit. A lot of times people know that sports staff are basically the strongest and lifeblood of this district, and we rely on you heavily, as we do all sports staff, to make things look easy. And I know you work long hours. You're here long after these board meetings are over. You've been patient enough with me when I need to get some personnel packets out to the board members' homes to say, come on, Lou, let's get it going here, as we stay late into the night. And, but more importantly, you participated in the district in many different events. About over a decade ago, when we were doing concerts for various relief funds, whether it be Katrina relief or other relief benefit concerts that we did, Haiti was hit with a natural disaster. And at that time, we had a Hearts to Haiti benefit concert, and beyond strict, and they went up on the stage, and they sang the Haitian national anthem. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house that night. And board and previous boards and administrators and teachers and staff do appreciate the hard work. Now I are both Brazil fans, and Pele. I was an attacker, and that's why I still feel the bruises of all those defenders on my legs. But you're moving on, and everybody should know that your children did go through this school system. Yep. Yep. They have achieved great things. You have a doctor in your family. You're a grandfather now, and I know you'll enjoy that moment of being a grandfather. And I'm sure as you sit back and pop open your Heineken, which you love, appreciate everything you've done over the years. So thank you very much.
Yes, I'm overwhelmingly grateful, that's the word, to this school district and the community. I want first to thank the past and current board and administrators who helped to give me the opportunity to work for the last 29 years. And I must also say I've been blessed, my family and I. Most of my children who are the biggest beneficiary of what Princeton does best, educating its students. Like you just said, 2 of my children have earned their doctorate degrees. One of them is in the financial world. And I would say, I would wish that Princeton continue to do what they do best, educate these children. Because, to the story short, my daughter entering medical school was, but there's a thing you call white coat ceremony. Mm-hmm. And I attend that with my wife. That day was about 150 students. I counted it was about 15 minority students. And quite frankly, I was kind of intimidated. And I approached her after the ceremony. I said, her name is Sasha. I said, Sash, can you do this? She said, yes, Daddy. I'm from Princeton. And don't forget, if I pass Mrs. Thompson's class, there's nothing I cannot achieve. And Mrs. Thompson was her 9th grade teacher English 9th grade teacher. She was tough. She challenges kids to be wherever they want to be in life. That's why, again, my biggest wish that Preston continue to do that, have these kids the opportunity to be who they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I guess we're going back to the, not away from the kids and then onto the bylaws again. I'd rather hear about the kids. Actually, we're finished with bylaws, and I think we were about to do a roll call vote on the personnel actions. So,
The comments.
Ms. Kennedy, would you like to do that?
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld,
Yes.
Daniel Dart,
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch,
Yes.
Bill Hare,
Yes.
Betsy Calverbaglio, Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous, passed. That moves us to K2, which is the Employee Assistant Program, and I think that's part of the consent. And then we go to the recognition of Mr. Lucker. No action?
No action, just recognition.
We're doing the recognition of Mr. Lucker.
Oh, the recognition of Mr. Lucker, the proclamation. There are a lot of whereas is.
Oh, should I read it?
If you'd like to read it, yes. Yeah.
Whereas it's the desire of the Princeton Public School Board of Education to recognize those who have given their time and energy to render valuable service to our district, and whereas Jeff Lucker has served as social studies teacher in the district for 50 years to the benefit of our students at Princeton High School since 1969, and whereas Jeff conscientiously prepared for a career of public service and education through dedicated professional training, and whereas the students, parents, and colleagues of Mr. Lucker have greatly benefited from his many contributions to our district. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Princeton Public Schools Board of Education warmly commend Jeffrey Lucker for his services to the students, staff, parents, and community of Princeton, and formally declares Friday, January 18th, 2019 as Jeff Lucker Day at Princeton High School and in the Princeton Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this proclamation, suitably endorsed, may be transmitted to him, endorsed by order of the Princeton Public School Board of Education. Duly, yes.
Which we did.
There
We
go.
did on
that
Friday.
already. Yeah.
Beth and I signed
I
that,
signed
and you heard my comments about Jeff earlier, but just a remarkable man,
Thank you.
and a blessing to our district.
Okay, and now
Can I just say one thing about
Yep.
Mr. Lucker?
Absolutely.
And that is that of all the things that have been said, the one thing I haven't heard is how he makes his students citizens of the world. And that is something that is unique and that will hopefully make the world a better place. So I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you, Michelle.
from him.
I think that moves us on to a number of consent items, Stephanie?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think I'll read the titles of the consent items all in order, and we will hold our comments if we have any till the very end, and then we can give them at one time. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Discussion? So L1, Educational Consulting Services, Proof Positive Psychology. L2, Educational Consulting, Teachers College Reading and Writing Project Network. L3, Educational Consultant, Heinemann Seminars. L4, Educational Consulting, Newton Education Solutions. 5, Plan Submission, NJDOE 3-year preschool plan. I keep going. M1, Revised Competitive Contracting Award with Wilson Reading and Language Services. M2, Residency Appeal. M3, Educational Placement of Special Needs Pupils. M4, Professional Consulting, Comprehensive Mental Health Services. M5, Professional Consulting, Graham Behavior Services. N1, Financial Reports. N2, Purchase of Technology. N3, Bus Safety Drills. 4, Fire and Evacuation Drills. 5, Travel and Related Expenses. O1, Approve,
Consent.
there we are,
Yeah,
approve the
there you
consent item.
Now we can do
Agenda.
first and second and ask
Can I have a
questions.
first, or have any, first? Greg, second?
Bill.
Bill, do we have any discussion? All in favor? Show of hands? Unanimous? Passed. Okay, that moves us on to P1, Site and Civil Engineering Architectural Services Referendum. What's the action there?
Yeah, we made
Oh,
a
it's-
new, yeah, we made a new section just specific for referendum, so if there's a need for action versus consent,
Okay, the first action would be the
civil engineer
civil engineering approval of the CME Associates as civil engineers,
as a SPESL subconsultant.
as
Right.
SPESL, yeah,
Yeah.
as recommended by the Finance Facilities Committee this morning.
Mhm.
Is there any, can I have a
First and
motion?
second. First, yep.
Motion. Bill? Second? Brian? Any discussion? A show of hands for approval? Unanimous? Passed. Second item, establish of investment accounts, bond proceeds. Can I have a motion? Greg? Second, Bill? Any discussion? Show of hands? Unanimous? Approved? We're on to training.
Okay.
So we now are going to continue our meeting. We're still on television, I'll remind everyone. We're going to bring forward Jesse
Behave
Adams
yourselves.
from the New Jersey School Board Association. We want to continue our training on a communications contract, and we all agreed at our last kind of retreat time that we would do this in public session because we think it's helpful for the public to hear us do some of our work as we work on governance. And so I will invite Jesse Adams to come forward. You're going to stay or you're going to go? Thank you, Frank, for coming and spending time with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Nice to meet everybody.
And I'd just like to introduce Jesse is our district representative. You want to come right here? And again, to give some background, Greg, would you like to give a little bit of a bio on Jesse again, all of his experience? I think it's helpful for people to understand how lucky we are to have him leading us in this conversation.
Absolutely. I'll start and then please jump in. But I just wanted to thank Jesse Adams, who's our field service representative from the New Jersey School Boards Association. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jesse now this is my third year. And Jesse comes to us with a tremendous amount of experience in the private sector, as well as in the armed forces. He served on 2 boards of education, I think, for over 2 decades. But tell me if I'm misquoting it. And has been a field service representative for a number of counties, including, thankfully, Mercer County, for a number of years now. And so I just wanted to thank you again, Jesse. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's, like I said, you guys are doing some good stuff here. I mean, you've got a new board starting off, and
Oh,
I'm sorry.
you know what? Can I just suggest before, I don't want to interrupt, but maybe the board needs to, does the board need a 5-minute break before we go on? We're going to spend 1 hour on this tonight. Oh, let's just take 3 minutes. We'll wait for them to come back. Anyone else needs to go?
I think everybody needs a
Stand on it for a second.
Hey, Jess, good to see you, man. I'm fine. Got the meeting done by 9 o'clock? What do you think? No, it's good. I didn't speak to you. You know, here's what was
Okay, all right, so we're going to continue what we started at the retreat, and hopefully we'll be able to move through this relatively quickly and establish the communication agreements that all of you hopefully will live up to in the long term. So I know that Stephanie's running some extra copies right now. We had gotten started in the first section, which was this board expects. And just a recap, we talked about regular communication from the superintendent. Sunday night by email, everybody agreed that email was working well for you, and that Sunday night notes and Fridays as needed. And you guys didn't want to place it as a mandatory every Sunday, every Friday, but as needed, leaving it to the discretion of the superintendent. The second item was about emergencies, and the consensus was that all of those emergencies, school emergency, lockdowns, fires, et cetera, student emergencies like an arrest, injury, or a death, and any kind of staff emergencies such as arrest, injury, or death, you wanted to be notified as soon as possible, either by phone or email, at the superintendent's discretion, so that, obviously he may be fighting the fire at that time, but he may not be able to get right to you, but you hopefully be aware that he is working it. I know we talked about a possible practice would be if he knows there's an issue for his administrative secretary to shoot something out or a quick call to all the board members saying superintendent's handling an emergency at the present time and will inform you as soon as he's able to. So that.
Can you change that language? When you say at his discretion, it means he doesn't have to. When you say at his discretion, it means he doesn't have to notify us, as opposed to using the term as early as is practical under the circumstances, which means that he deals with a fire and then
Right. So as soon as possible, as soon as
is practical, under the circumstances.
Right.
But Steve would retain the ability to use his judgment if he felt there was confidential information, a student's name or something like that.
Oh, yeah, we'd never use a student's name, but yeah.
He would always have that responsibility for maintaining student privacy and those kind of things. But, so as soon as practical for the situation.
Under the
Under
circumstances.
the circumstances.
Right. And with an understanding, you may not know of every single injury that happens. Like, there's a degree, there's discretion with regard to the severity.
Severity,
Yeah.
yes.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right.
Kids get broken clavicles and things like that all the time, but we don't need to know that. We need to know of the outside the realm
Outside the
things.
norm kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? Okay. We talked about the board packets and supporting documentation so many days before. I know there was a little bit of discussion. You were gonna have a conversation with Stephanie and at some point come up with what is a reasonable.
I think we said probably Fridays is what she's doing.
Yeah.
Right, and that, I think that was the concern that folks felt that they wanted more time.
What was actually helpful this Friday, and hopefully we can continue it as a practice, was we had at least a draft of an agenda for our meeting, because now Greg and Beth and I are meeting on Friday afternoon, so we can review the draft agenda. And that's helpful in terms of, what information then Beth needs to send out, what information I can send out, and we can ask for clarification.
Now, I might have Cranberry and Princeton confused, but did we just review a policy that said 2 days before? Or where did I read that? Is there something that said 2 days before? No? Okay, I made it up.
And is Friday just the best time for Steve and Stephanie and the president and vice president? Or just I'm wondering whether all of that could switch to hypothetically Thursday or Wednesday. There's a lot of volume here, and trying to get through what was more than 200 pages took a big chunk of the weekend. So I'm just wondering, I understand that there are a lot of factors in play here.
We can look to try and get it earlier, but there's a lot to pull it all together, and we still get changes on Monday sometimes. So
Right.
we're trying to.
It would then be even more maybe piecemeal if we had it. I'm concerned that.
Yeah. Yeah. Friday helps us grab 98% of it.
Is that the consensus, is leave it at Friday for now? Okay.
No, we're talking about when the agendas.
When the agenda is ready for the board.
Board meeting, and I know you won't be here, but I know you always like to get everything by Monday. I was wondering, we have a board meeting one Monday night. I know you switched one in May, whatever it is. And I always know that Stephanie always wanted everything by Monday so that Tuesday she could prepare. So that one meeting's going to be flip-floppy.
If it is a Monday, then we should really get it on Thursday, right?
Right, but we're also not going to email until, like Sunday. I mean, if you think about it, it'll just be a tough one.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of questions.
So you were fast today. You went through about all the ones from the weekend. You went through in about 5 minutes. Suddenly, bing, 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 bing.
That's how come they weren't written in full sentences.
Michelle?
Yes.
I think that we need to just be realistic about what they can really make happen in a period of time. We need to be realistic about how much time it takes us to go over information. So we can, if you have a cutoff of the Thursday before, that may very well mean that you don't have information about something that happened on Friday and if we're willing to say that's fine, these last minute things that happen, we can be verbally updated or informed by a short email with more detail to follow in the following month, then maybe we can buy ourselves a day or two. But if we want a packet that's comprehensive and thorough and doesn't have typos and all that stuff, then we have to be realistic about how much time it takes to put it.
Our Friday meetings are, we do have these Friday meetings. We've only had one, but it does seem to make sense. At the end of the week, you have the time. We're able to sit and go through the agenda, and then it can go out after that.
And remember, we're asking for personnel recommendations and other things to come in at the beginning of the week, and then we have clerical work to lay it all out and process it and write things up. So there's.
Well, then maybe part of this is also when we have our committee meetings. Because if we're scheduling a committee meeting on Monday, personnel is huge. We met on Monday, and then they have to do things get it done by Friday. Maybe we should look at how we schedule our committee meetings as well, so that we can give them more time, instead of scheduling them close to when our board meetings are.
That is something that you should look at, depending on the work that you want your committees to do in preparation for that next meeting. You're correct. The closer you bring those meetings to the actual board meeting, the tougher it is for your administrative team to get things that they need, the I's dotted, the T's crossed that need to be,
If
done.
there's substantial changes, like with personnel, like he comes with a lot of the work already done, so you're reviewing it in advance and then just asking questions, which is helpful.
Some of those items don't go onto an agenda publicly until after the meeting.
Correct.
So you really are looking at, I think, you probably are not going to solve it tonight. I think Friday is the current status. I think process-wise, as you get a better handle on how you want to operate from a committee perspective, then looking at the timeline for the month from, what is a realistic timeline in the month to get all of the board's work done in preparation for that next meeting. So I think that's probably an action that as a board, I think February, we're talking about effective committees. And I would say probably sometime in the first half of this year, you should be thinking about how do you lay that all out and make it all work so that you have a process that works well for the board members. Your perspective is I need to do my homework before the meeting. The business administrator and the superintendent need to get everything so that it's prepared in a timely manner, and there's a lot to pull together.
Okay, we can look at that.
Okay?
Jesse, would it be fair for now, so we can move forward, to just say that we need, that the board would like to have a minimum of 2 business days? That would be Friday, Monday? Like, if we can get it on Friday?
We'll just say Friday, I think we have to say Friday.
That won't happen because we're still putting everything together and gathering information on Fridays. Although we try to get it all done, and we're still processing bills even up through Thursday afternoon.
Right.
And if there's some others that come in, we'll do them Friday morning. So,
But it'll come out Friday at some point.
oh yeah, I always
Yeah.
release it on Fridays. It's released on Fridays. By the
But we're not
time,
gonna get too, I get you,
So we're
I
trying
get
to
you.
balance as complete as possible and as soon as possible.
Right.
And right
Yeah.
now, that looks like Friday.
Right. I think it looks like.
Currently
Well,
it's
Stephanie
Friday.
did get pushback from the board because we were getting, what was the other sheet? The addendums. And the addendums were getting to be multiple pages, and we didn't like that either. So Stephanie got that pushback as well.
That's gonna be the trade-off, because if you do push it, let's say, for example, the board said, we gotta have it by Wednesday. Between Wednesday and Tuesday's meeting, things that occur are gonna show up on an addendum, and you're gonna see them either Monday or at the meeting. And at some point, you're gonna say, there's too many addendum items, I
Yeah.
can't do
I think-
enough homework. So-
I think we should just keep moving because, look, this is it's Friday now, but we obviously all know we can talk about this and change it if we need to in the future and-
Right.
and look at it
All
next
right,
year.
so Friday, and then you guys are gonna plan to look at your process. Monthly expenditure reports, no issue, good. All board members receive the same information. That, we started to talk about that if you have questions.
Right.
You have a process for questions, and that, I guess I'm asking, when questions get asked, if I ask a question, and I get an answer, do the rest of the board get the same information and answers?
It seems like we have 2 things to talk about here. One is, in connection with the agendas, I think we have talked about the fact that we all should get questions to Stephanie by Monday, and then when it's responded, she's going to respond to all of us, which hasn't been the practice before, but now it will make sure we all have the same information. One of us asks a question, we respond to all. But the other thing we talked about last time that seemed a little bit less clear was, what if this is not on the agenda? What if we just have a question? What do we do with it? And we talked about the fact if it related to a particular committee, then it would be appropriate for us to put that question to the committee chair, for that person to aggregate it and pass it on.
It depends on for example, I may have a question on the committee and something that potentially I want the committee to bring up. That's a conversation. I go directly to the committee chair. Hey, when at your next meeting, can you please add this to your agenda as an item of discussion? Obviously, the committee chair controls the agenda, and if for whatever reason the committee chair says, no, I'm not going to put that on my agenda, sometimes a board member will feel like they're getting stifled. Board member always has the opportunity to bring it to the full board.
Right.
To get it added to a committee agenda. But, I mean, assuming that your committee chair's responsibility is ensuring that, number one, the work of the committee gets done in preparation for the board meeting, but also addresses concerns in that committee area that may be brought to the table by the chair, then I don't think that will be a problem, because the chair should address and answer questions relating to his or her area.
But I think the question we kind of were talking about last time was, how do we prevent Steve from having to answer questions from all 10 of us
And,
all the time? Or
Right.
whenever, or just at any time.
but the issue would be the types of questions that are getting asked. If there is a committee chair or a committee that is in that area, that'd be better use of your time as a board and Steve's time if the committee chair could collect those and address them at the committee meeting with the liaison and the folks that you have.
But what if there's not a committee meeting before the board meeting, and you have, like, let's just say it's a policy question in advance of voting at a meeting. Would the board member write to Greg, copy me, and Greg could respond?
Typically, your policy chair should be able to answer the question, and if the policy chair doesn't know or not quite sure, he's probably gonna pick up the phone and call you and say, how do we do this?
Right, yeah.
So that way, you get the questions when the chair is actually stumped versus you being the clearinghouse for all questions.
I think the one point that I have to say is in the responding all, when you ask a question and then you would respond to the whole board, then you have the chance of the online meeting.
Yeah, we talked about that you don't.
Yeah.
The replying all is only for you, basically. You're sending the information out. I recommend you have that disclaimer at the top of the message that says, information only, do not reply all. Any questions, please contact the committee chair, so-and-so directly, and then the board needs to ensure that their practice is, I have a question, I don't hit reply, I don't make that mistake and hit reply all and start a board meeting.
Okay.
So I guess I just want to make sure we're all comfortable. Does that make sense that if we have questions, we want to know things, we either ask them through the committee chairs, or what if they don't fit in a committee chair? Then what do we do?
Because my question, this seems to me a significant change in process because we are not to communicate or ask anything of other staff members, just Steve.
Right.
So what I'm hearing, and I appreciate and certainly respect your time, Steve, but if there are more routes to get to Steve, when actually what I want to know, the high school principal or an elementary principal is going to actually answer it even more quickly. How can we be most productive as a board?
I think you have, it's twofold. One, the questions going to your superintendent should be questions that board members should be asking versus administrative questions. So if you're asking about school operations, what's going on in this district, et cetera, that's not your role. So if you're asking an oversight kind of question, then if your chair, if you have a committee that can answer it or is working on that or can answer it, that's an easy call. If it's not, then you got to go to your superintendent because you're right. You don't have access to the staff. He gives you access to the staff through your committees, or if he needs someone to get in touch with you to answer a question that he'll make that call. But I think you got to be careful. You got to be careful the kind of questions you're asking of your superintendent, that you're not violating the act and you're actually administering and questioning how the operational things are happening.
So can you give an example? Let's take a facilities. I'm trying to think of something that I may have originally asked Steve, and Steve then would find out from, and I'm trying to think of an appropriate board member question.
My alarm issue.
That's true. Ask that question.
Yeah, that's a complaint.
So a neighbor of mine next to the high school, a number of them are complaining about the alarm going off.
The building alarms?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the middle of the night, 2 a.m. and then 3 a.m. and so they're asking how to deal with it. And so what would one do in a situation like that?
So he's contacted by a community.
Right.
Maybe I ran into them while walking the dog.
Okay.
And they're walking their dog and they ask me.
What you would say is you to ask them to contact the facilities director. That's the chain of command that would probably resolve that issue. And then you would then call the superintendent, say, give you a heads up, I had this complaint from a member of the community about the alarms going off at 2 in the morning. I referred him to the facilities director, but I want you to be aware of it so that you can do whatever you need to do on you. So there's no surprises. You've closed the loop with the superintendent. You've you've done your responsibility of not trying to solve the problem by law. You've given them the chain of command to go to. And, you know, your superintendent's probably gonna say, okay, I didn't know the alarms were going off at 2 in the morning. And he's probably gonna call facility directors, hey, did you get a call from so-and-so yet? What's going on with the alarm? So you've handled it legally from that perspective. You haven't overstepped and say, I'll solve your problem for you. I'm gonna go work it.
But you did tell him, so.
And then 2 months later, they say, it's still going off and I don't get any help. And they're looking bleary-eyed. And they don't like me at all now.
Nothing's changed.
And
Things change.
the conversation goes back, you call the superintendent to say, this is, the same member is coming back, and you may not be getting the full story from that member. He'll be able to tell you what was done, or if nothing was done, then he's gotta go fire up, you know, the facilities director.
That's a helpful example for me, because I thought what you were saying was we should take any of those comments and only, like, I would only direct it to the facilities director.
No.
And, okay.
You
But-
would help them with the chain of command.
Right.
So that they
Right.
know how to go.
But as far
address
as
it.
protecting Steve's time and not hearing from all of us all the time,
Right.
that is an example where he's still the right call.
Right,
Right.
it's,
Okay.
remember, what you're doing is no surprises.
Yep.
And that conversation there is the professional courtesy that
Okay.
hopefully, if the chain of command works the way it's supposed to, you won't hear about it, because it's gonna get resolved.
Okay, what about non-complaint? It's not a complaint, it doesn't fit in a committee, and we still have a question about something we really want to know. What do? We want to ask, we just want to know, and our instinct is to reach out and say, Steve, explain this to me. And
You know, you as a board member need to think about, am I asking an administrative question, or am I asking an oversight question? And if it falls into your purview of oversight, pick up the phone, call your superintendent, ask the question. If you know you're crossing that line into administering, you need to take a step back and say, I'm out of my swim lane.
But you said, didn't we talk about last time that these questions that didn't fit in committees didn't necessarily go straight to him? Weren't we supposed to make sure we're asking on behalf of the board, that we're not just asking one-off questions that we all have?
What I was talking about is 10. He doesn't have 10 bosses.
Yeah.
And so the issue is, board member A calls, needs some information, can you get me this? Board member B, can you get me this? He's now taking orders
Yeah.
from 10 people. If somebody has a need, information, data, I need you to go investigate this, that's a board decision. And you need to bring that back to the board to say, I need this information, or I would like to get this information, or I believe there's a problem in area X and I'd like to get it investigated. That's a board discussion. And if the consensus says, yeah, we need to go look into that, now the superintendent has direction from the board to now go off and do that versus taking direction from 10 different individuals.
So Jesse, couldn't that come from, I mean, if we were to funnel those kinds of questions to our leadership, then,
Our leadership being the board leadership?
yeah. So that, I mean, if a question, if it falls under, if it's clear where it falls under committee, then it goes to the committee. If it doesn't, then rather than all 10 of us constantly making those requests, if we funnel them, I'm just thinking out
Because
loud
we're
here.
sitting with him
Because
once a
then
week,
that's a
we can bring
question
it.
that could come up in that Friday meeting, and then you get back to the full board with the information that comes from the question that was submitted by one of us.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be more efficient?
Well, it depends on the question, but yeah, I mean, if you have a question that doesn't fit a committee, and it's not an administrative question, and it's not a direction, it's not giving direction, then a process of maybe if you meet weekly,
Yeah.
so that may be a good process for you all, is to send that type of a question to your leadership, who can bring it up and have a conversation with the superintendent.
And it can be more than weekly if there's people coming with issues they have, and happy to aggregate and then bring it on,
But as a
email.
board, you need to take a step back and say, if all of these issues are coming in, are they truly issues that the board should be, asking about?
So,
Is it the classrooms are being renovated and we're adding, carpeting in there and folks are asking, well, I'm hearing that the glue smells. I'm hearing, now you are administering, okay? Versus carpets are being installed and there's a question of, did we budget for that? Do we have the funding or the resources available? That's a board question versus the glue smells. I heard a teacher complain that the glue smells.
We don't like the color.
Now you're administering. So that, you've got to understand the distinction between.
But glue smells can be a complaint.
well, it could also be safety related. So I'm sitting here as a board member thinking, people will bring us safety related. We still follow the chain of command, but that's not administrative if it's,
Well, I would say this, if the teacher isn't bringing it up, why isn't that being brought up?
or
Okay,
perhaps
that
the
would be my-
teacher is and the chain of command within the school hasn't solved the problem. So then a parent or a teacher
Yeah.
goes outside of the school. This is all obviously totally
I
hypothetical.
understand that, and if that's occurring, there's a breakdown on the
Okay.
internal process.
Okay, so that- I
Because
was-
teachers have a voice. If my
Right.
voice isn't being heard by my administrator, I
Yep.
go to my union president.
And not to us.
I go to my union president
Yep.
because I have a grievance, I have a complaint, I have a safety concern.
Mm-hmm.
My contract has provisions in there.
And the union will help them.
And the union rep would go have a conversation with the building principal or whatever. See, those are the channels that they have. So if a teacher's coming to a board member to complain, the question is, hey, did you talk to your building principal? Did you talk to your union rep? That's where they should be going. They should not be coming to board members because they have a complaint process
Of their own, right?
within the building, within their contract, they have a complaint process.
Jesse, so we'll all exercise our best judgment about when to communicate with Steve, and understand that this year may be a learning year as we try to figure out how all this works. My inclination, if I were to send something to Steve, would be to copy the board leadership, so they're aware, and they could say, that's really not a Steve thing. Or when they have their regular meetings, they have some awareness of the volume and the nature of the questions that have been going to Steve, in case the three of them feel that there might be some more efficient way to tackle certain things, or to, just so that they're aware of, what's going on. That's my inclination. Is that a good practice?
Of copying your board leadership, a lot of boards do that. If there is indeed to send something to the superintendent, they copy the board president.
Yeah, I actually appreciate that. That you copy Beth and Greg.
Yeah, and that way, if it is out of line, the board president's responsibility is to pick up the phone and say, let's talk about that one.
Well, it also helps with, because we do so much of our work in committees, there could be questions that we can then say, okay, there's a pattern of these questions.
we
There's
do a
the,
working
like, we can, a working group, or we
People
can
look at
funnel
it.
it to
Or
a
give it to
particular
a committee
or.
to go do
yeah.
the homework on it, right,
Good, so keep going.
right?
Keep going.
Did I answer your part?
Yeah, I just think that it's a mutual learning and sort of training. A mutual learning and sort of training process, so, we're gonna try all these things, and,
Yeah.
Ultimately,
We'll see how it
Steve's
goes.
time is most precious, all of our time is also
Yeah.
precious, but trying to figure out what works best.
And I think the tough part is understanding the separation between the board's role and administrator's role, and not getting caught up in those, the kind of questions that are really administration type questions.
Right, but
And that's a
essential,
learning experience.
this was a theme of, Dan and I went to your
Yep.
22 hours of training a couple weekends ago. Yeah, I appreciated the 2 hours to sleep and eat. And in our small groups, a question that came up over and over again is, how do you be responsive to community concerns? And how do you stay within the chain of command? But, there generally was not a high level of comfort that, you're done, because you kind of want to know, did we get this problem solved? And that there wasn't really a resolution other than it seems to be a balancing act between the desire of the elected board that believes that they're representatives of their community and wants to have the best relationship possible with the community to advance the goals of the district in the interest of the students and to do everything appropriately.
And yeah, I understand. And the big thing is, and every board struggles with that last tenet of the code of ethics, because it says you can't solve problems. You've got to refer them to the chain of command, up and down. And that's because you're right. People look at you to solve the problem. They don't understand.
We're problem solvers.
They don't understand that you can't solve a problem unless you're a board, as a board, and only after the administration has had their shot at solving those problems. And that's the big thing, is educating your constituents that they get first crack at it. And if they fail, then he's going to be bringing it to you because person X didn't like his final decision and is requesting a hearing before the board. And you're right. Every board struggles with that because it's that balancing act. And if you tip it the wrong way, you got somebody coming after you because you violated the code of ethics.
Can we keep rolling?
All right.
I don't know which we're all gonna last. So.
All right, so from an additional information, you guys are going to have a process that works through committees. Those questions that cannot be funneled to a committee will go to the superintendent, copied the board president. That's what I think I heard through all that discussion.
I guess so.
Okay.
Do
All
we
right.
copy the superintendent on the email to the committee chair?
I don't necessarily think you need to.
Okay.
I think the chair is going to take it from there, and if the
Okay.
chair needs help,
I'd like to keep his inbox as clean as possible.
yeah, the chair will reach out.
That's the subtext, is to
I mean, the
keep
chair
hands.
may go to the
Got it.
liaison person,
Yeah.
because he's assigned a liaison to each of the committees and has given the liaison the authority to talk with the chair. That answer might be right there without having
Yep.
to go to the superintendent.
Okay.
All right? All right. Which we're at, 6? The board members will treat each other and staff with respect. Anybody object to that?
7.
All right. That the superintendent staff will treat all board members with respect. That reasonable requests for additional information will be satisfied in a timely manner. I think that ties into what we just talked about.
Reasonable requests.
And that's,
Reasonable requests, so we defined that.
you're gonna become the clearinghouse for reasonableness, so.
But you know what the one thing is that sometimes you have to learn how to disagree. I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to learn how to disagree. And I think that's where we can run into some turbulence around respect. And sometimes it's tone and sometimes it's substance. But the fact is that we're all very different people and we're not always going to see the world the right way. The world the same way. It's late. The world the same way. Right. And so I think that part of it is just being cognizant of how we communicate our disagreements.
You're spot on.
Yeah, I think we could
You're
use some of
spot on.
that.
And it is important that you're all individuals, you're all elected to serve on the board, you all have views and opinions, and there's a professional way to disagree. And we tell boards this when we talk about parliamentary procedures, that being civility allows for a good debate.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it personal. Don't take it personal. Stay focused on the issue, and and how you say it can send the wrong message. And you're 100% right. And the other piece is too, when we talk about parliamentary procedure, the discussion isn't, Brian to Debbie. It's you're making your point to the chair. That's where the discussion takes place. Motion second, do we have any discussion? She recognizes you have a comment to make. Your comment is to the chair. Any other comments? Debbie has a comment. Her comment, she doesn't agree with your comment. Her comment's to the chair, not to Brian. It's, the point was made, I don't agree with it, here's my rationale. It's not, I don't agree with you, Brian, because now it's personal.
Okay, that's
All
helpful.
right, that's part of parliamentary procedures, is that everything funnels through the chair.
That's good.
And the management of the debate is through the chair, so that it's civil, professional, and you don't have somebody in the audience going, ooh, look at that, you know. That's all part of process. And at some point, we'll have a discussion about parliamentary procedures, but that's some of the basics.
Okay,
Okay?
good. Keep going.
So no surprises, everybody agrees with that. And what that means is both ways. No surprises to the superintendent and the BA, and no surprises from the BA and superintendent to the board, and no surprises against each other. Board president, you know, there shouldn't be a packed house here because there's an issue in a section of town that one person on the board knows about and nobody else does. That's a surprise. You know something's coming, let the board member, let the board president, superintendent know, hey, we may have a packed house the next meeting because this issue's brewing in our neighborhood. That's a heads up, no surprises.
Jesse, we got a half an hour to cover the rest of
Gotcha.
your agenda.
All right.
I have a hard stop at 10:30.
Absolutely.
Superintendent expects that requests for additions to the agenda will be received at least X days before the meeting.
Stephanie, what do we, what
Say 1 day.
Are you asking about,
From a process, if someone wants to add something,
meaning the board?
the board, this is more towards the board because you have an internal deadline for folks to bring things to you and the superintendent. If somebody on the board wants to add something to the agenda, what is your board's process? Most boards, you go through the board president if you want to add something. The question is, by when in advance of, in this case, Friday, when you're putting that agenda out, should a board member contact the board president to add something to the agenda?
Friday is not very good.
No,
Yeah.
so,
Monday.
no, so you should say at least 1 or 2 days, right?
Before Friday.
before, yeah, by Wednesday?
Wednesday, so that's,
Do we have a lot of that, though?
no, but we
Because
should just
because
say,
it
we
just-
should,
Because it just usually
it
goes
doesn't
through
really have to
committee,
list,
so,
so maybe like say 3 or 4 days.
yeah,
Well, committee stuff too. That would refer to committee stuff too.
okay.
Right, so, I mean, so for Fridays, Friday's your standard right now for so Wednesdays prior, you want any board activity, i.e. committees or other board potential agenda items through Beth.
To create it and then get it back.
Okay. So by Wednesday before, I'll word that appropriate, okay?
So
That-
I'm hearing committee meetings really, truly cannot take place after the Wednesday before a board meeting.
If you're gonna want to get,
I'm just saying, often in student achievement, there'll be a number of field trips on the agenda. And they'll be placed on the agenda for Tuesday, on Friday, but we might be meeting Friday. So they're placed on the agenda pending approval,
You could just say
right?
except as otherwise agreed.
Right, I'm just saying,
Yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah.
That's
okay,
fine.
okay. It doesn't have to be exact.
So it's interesting because Lou has always placed our personnel the Friday or Monday before the meeting because he says he can't get all the stuff together. And so I don't know if the new you know what I mean? Like, and I don't, that's how he's always done it.
I just think we need to stay in dialogue about this
Yeah.
because I don't think we have to set this in a,
Okay.
that's not the, right.
So then that holds up the whole process. So we're usually waiting for all the pieces that are
Right.
put together in those instances. And we're waiting, and we get it at 3:30 or 4 o'clock on Friday, and then we gotta do what we gotta do and get it out. So,
That's kind of a question of your team.
Yeah, you really should be pushing back on the administrators,
We'll
like,
have to-
of each committee and telling them when you need the stuff. And then we would back in to do our committee meetings.
right.
No, I mean,
Ideally, your committee meeting should fit the
Like a
schedule
function, yeah,
to make an
But like an
agenda.
operation, I mean, that's,
Right.
if that's what's helping, you know.
Maybe we have an opportunity to re-examine that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think,
'Cause we'll
I
have some
think
new
next month when
people.
we talk about
like
effective
that,
when we talk about effective committees next
Yeah.
month, you can talk about timelines that work for the process.
Yeah.
You know what your end date is, what do you gotta do to get to that end date each time?
Okay.
Right?
Keep going.
That direction is only given at board meetings when a majority of the board votes to give direction.
Right.
Anybody disagree with that?
What do you mean by direction?
The conversation we had a couple minutes ago about there aren't 10 bosses, there's one boss. It's the board. So if Jesse has an idea or when I need something, I need to bring it to the full board, explain why I think I need this. We have a conversation. Beth would take a consensus, and if the consensus is, yeah, that's good information, let's get it, that's direction to the superintendent to go off and do that.
Oh,
He's
okay. The word
taking-
direction threw me.
Right?
Okay.
He's taking his direction based on the board, the consensus of the board.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
Where are we at?
Respectful of staff.
That board members will be respectful towards staff and be respectful of staff's time. I think that's important as a board,
We're working on it.
right?
Yep.
That board members will read all supporting documentation before the board meeting. That board members will call someone with questions about agenda items or supporting materials at least. So you guys are like backed up to each other. So
Well,
your questions go to you, I think you have a process
They
now,
go to the
right?
BA and
Questions
at
go
least-
to the BA, right?
At least one day, right?
Yeah, at least at the latest Monday, so that
You can,
I might have to reach out to somebody else.
right, so that sometime between Monday and the meeting on Tuesday, you can send answers out to folks.
Right.
All right, so, yeah, all right, so basically Monday is when you
Yep.
need to have
But
questions.
if an agenda item is regarding personnel, for example, we're emailing Stephanie the question, or we're emailing Debbie? I just want to,
Good question.
so if I'm saying, hey, I see something's listed twice on the
Oh,
agenda,
yeah.
I'm not emailing Stephanie, right? Because then she would have to go find the HR director. Wouldn't it go through a chair, whoever's sort of responsible for that? Maybe at some point we review which administrator's responsible for putting items on which section.
Why don't you just say, we'll call the responsible administrator, because we kind of know who that is at this point. We call her about the, I
Right.
think we know,
Board members will call the appropriate chair
or administrator.
or
Then you have.
the BA.
Yeah.
Then you have
It's the chair, and then the chair communicates with the liaison if it's appropriate.
Yeah, see, I mean, your example, you see, I'm seeing something twice on the
On the
agenda,
personnel agenda.
right? That might be a mistake.
Right. But would Stephanie know if it's a mistake, or would Lou know if it's a mistake?
Right. Or your question you emailed
Right.
us
About
today about like
Teachers
the,
College.
yes, Teachers College, who's going to be participating in this professional
Right,
development.
right.
You appropriately sent that to Annie,
Right.
copied me.
Right.
Stephanie's not going to
Right, right,
probably
right.
know the
Know
answer.
about that. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So the chair
Yeah.
would know who to reach out to
Yeah.
get the answer. So does anybody have a problem with that?
Contact the chair.
Contact the chair.
Well,
But
but in
when we-
finance, we all call her directly because we
Because
know.
because she has all the
She's
answers
the
on
liaison,
finance.
right?
Yeah. So it's the liaison, right?
Yeah, she's like the chair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who's your finance chair?
that guy.
We'll have to ask
But
her.
she's
Right.
administrative liaison. Is that the term you use? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's your administrative liaison to each committee. So
Yeah.
the question is,
The
Yeah.
appropriate administrative liaison.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with them as my designee in that respect. I think it.
for all board members or just the chair? You've only given the authority to the chair. For them, that's the one-on-one connection that you've
Right.
established. So that they don't have to come to you, the chair doesn't have to come to you to get something done through your
This is
liaison.
talking about the
yeah.
agenda, so, this is
But
pretty specific.
Yeah, but I think we're trying to say if there's a question on an agenda item and it's under personnel,
Oh, we go through that chair.
that chair,
Yeah, because that chair is the person who, if it makes sense, would logically get
That's
more
true.
information from the
Right.
liaison.
I mean, on
Yeah.
finance, we can just aggregate everything with Bill and it can go on.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the past, we've always, various finance committee members have sent Stephanie the question. I have this question on the bills. That I think it's worked out well. I don't know if you feel like it's.
Would you prefer to get it all at once?
Again, my microphone's off.
You would prefer to
As
get it
would
all at
mine.
once? She would prefer to get it all at
The
once.
questions went
Yes.
to the chair, who then could
give you in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
The list of questions.
It sounds like that's-
16 things when you're trying to get the.
Right.
stuff together. Right.
That's fine. So the board's agreeing that the chair has that responsibility.
Yeah, I think
That's part of your charter. The chairs have to know that that's their responsibility.
Committee chair.
The committee chair, yes.
Okay,
All right,
Good work. Okay.
let's see how that works.
okay.
And then number 6.
6 was that the Board of the Whole will vote to put an item on a future agenda before significant staff time is expended when preparing the agenda item would impact meeting previously approved goals, so that,
I didn't get that. Well, I don't understand that.
that means that if you're going to, if there's a project or something that you want, or someone needs, and it's
Yeah.
gonna take a lot of time for someone to do that work,
Yes.
the board needs to make sure that they fully understand the level of effort and that it may impact other things that are going on in the district. And then the board makes the decision, yes, we want you to do that.
So when
So
we are.
if you have an idea of something and you're having this discussion, it's up to the administration to say, time out. I understand what you're asking for. Here's what it takes to do that. And there may be some impacts, unintended consequences of that. And now you as a board have to make, do we still want that?
So,
Yeah.
a good example, because this is an interesting, exciting idea to individuals, and then everyone says, let's just do this, and that's the boxing up of the location of your files. Like, everyone wants to go after that and says, Stephanie, tell us how many files. Stephanie, how many files do you have? What are your boxes upstairs? Why can't we clean out your room? And that is an idea that could be appropriate, but for us to bring it up in a committee and suddenly say, let's go figure that out, it's a big project.
And
so-
causes anxiety.
And what this means is you're going to make sure that you're making decisions with the ramifications of that decision or the level of effort explained if necessary, so that you're not throwing something at them
That throws them off.
that throws them off of what you've got them focused on, especially with a referendum and other things
Right.
going on. Does everybody agree with that? Okay. Let's move to agenda agreements. Who may request items to be placed on the agenda? Do you have a policy that talks about
We have
agenda items?
the liaisons, based on the board committee activities, send it to me to put them onto the agenda. So, Annie, Lou, Mickey, all the,
Right.
and then I compile them and we get them on the
So
agenda.
right now,
And then,
your
of course,
committees,
superintendent.
and the liaison determine agenda items for their section, and they send them to you.
Yep.
That's your
Yes.
process,
Yes.
okay?
Not there's, for example, curriculum and instruction. Not all of those items go through the student achievement committee.
Correct.
Right.
So it's not always.
No, the
Right.
administrative liaison is the one that's loading them in.
You're not
I think
coming
it's
up
the
with them.
chairs and.
No, no. he's
Oh, no,
saying
no,
liaison.
we're not.
It's the chair, okay, wait, let me make sure I understand. The chairs, the liaisons are reviewing everything
And giving it to me.
with
Right.
the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then they are-
but
But then
Betsy's point
ultimately-
is not everything
Not
goes
every
through.
single thing.
Not every
right.
single
Okay.
thing on the board agenda goes
Goes
through.
to a
Right.
committee,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, all right. So, staff, you have an internal process for getting things onto the agenda, and then there's things that need to go to a committee. Those items get discussed, and some or all of those eventually go on the agenda as well. So you have two avenues that agenda items. The internal one is not the board's responsibility, that's yours. The committee activities, the committee and the liaisons are responsible for flushing those
Yep,
out,
yep.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
The other piece is, what if someone wants something on the agenda that doesn't necessarily fit in a committee? They should go to the board president.
Right.
Right?
We haven't had a lot of that. I think that's why we're not following some of that. It hasn't been an issue on this board that I'm aware
It
of.
really hasn't.
Okay. All right, so chairs and liaisons control the board piece of adding to the agenda. Board president will meet with superintendent
On Fridays.
Fridays. Yes, I'm sorry.
Just in your Is there, could you say whether it would be more typical for the agenda, sorry. Would you say it's more typical for committee meeting agendas to be driven by the board members or the administrative?
It's typically driven, it typically is kicked off through the administration, because they know what's going on during the month. These are the things we need to bring to the committee based on the process that says we need a committee to review this and make a recommendation to the board. Also, committee chairs have the ability to add things to the agenda themselves. So there may be some items that are work-related, business-related for the district that the liaison's bringing, but there may be some areas that board members have talked to the chair about that they would like discussed in a committee meeting. And so that's how some of those things may pop. They may not make the agenda, but they'll be part of a committee report that may drive eventually to something that goes on an agenda and gets acted on. So
Okay.
it's a
All right.
two-pronged
So
attack.
that's-
Consent agenda used, yep. Any board member may ask to have an item pulled from the consent agenda to allow for discussion or individual
Yep.
consideration. You guys do that?
Well, yeah, I would just add the board secretary to that notification.
The board will
Just 'cause,
notify superintendent and board secretary by,
when?
if you
By
want
Monday?
something to be pulled from the consent for an individual discussion.
Stephanie,
Again, best if it's,
Monday, right?
Monday, yeah.
Because
So that you can adjust it so that it,
we're all
yeah.
reading it anyway over the weekend for Monday, right?
because what happens if I get an email and I don't get it till 3 o'clock today,
You can't.
because I haven't gotten to it then.
right,
Yeah.
you know, it's still in the consent and somebody say, hey, I wanted that pull, okay. Okay, where, in your process, if someone pulls something from the consent, do you take that first or last? Basically, that's what it's asking.
Well, we're going order. Yeah, we have it by category, so if it's, like, say it's a curriculum item, it would be
It stays where it
within the
is.
curriculum, but we try to keep them, like, in the same kind of, order.
Okay.
So under curriculum, we have, professional services, and then we have another category, like a subcategory for different.
But the consent is at the very end.
But the consent
So if you're pulling
vote,
something out,
It's before.
Yeah,
would be before.
because you went through a whole list of
Yeah.
items, and then
Yeah.
you took the
So if
consent.
it's- yeah.
So if it's one of these items is being pulled, the question is, are you doing it before, or do you go after?
come back to it at the end.
And
or
come
the-
back to it after the consent is taken on the balance of
well, ordinarily, we do all the separate votes first.
Yeah, and then the
Except for
consent.
tonight, we did the referendum part after the consent.
Oh.
Okay.
So
So
we
if
can
somebody-
That
do-
was the
we
order in
can-
which you placed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so if
that's
somebody
just the order how
asks
I
for
placed it.
an item to be pulled for a separate discussion, it would show up on your agenda outside of that consent bucket. then, wouldn't
Absolutely, yeah,
It
which
would be-
shows action
yeah.
instead of
But
action
it would be within the
consent, but it would still
category.
be
If we know in
within the category.
advance, it would be within the category of personnel or student achievement or whatever.
Okay.
I do think
Policy.
it's too restrictive to,
Specify.
well, to have an item notify, not be able to pull the item out during the committee meeting. You may want to, consult with someone, another board member. I mean, how would it delay a board meeting if you're able to, have a motion to pull an item out for a brief discussion on that?
You don't mean
At the
committee
meeting?
meeting, you mean at the board
You're
meeting.
talking at the board meeting.
We've done it at the,
You-
yeah,
You've
you can
always,
do it.
you always have the
Yeah.
right to do
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
If you may, someone may not have thought of something, and while they're sitting there, say, you know what, we need to talk about this. You can make a motion to pull that. That always.
Can't
But
before
if
to vote on
if
it.
folks know in advance what we're saying, if you know in advance, by Monday, that way she can adjust the agenda accordingly so that it is ready for an individual vote and discussion.
And on the consent agenda, is it typical that we read the title to all, like we did today, go through every one of those items and read them? Or can you have a consent agenda, which you say is on the, everyone gets in advance, everyone's read it? Any questions?
There's no magic formula. When I used to do, it was personnel items 1 through 30.
You just said it.
That's it.
Didn't read the titles.
I didn't read the titles,
Fine.
1 through 30, and You know, it's on the agenda, it's at the door, everybody knows what we're talking about, so
But there might
it's
be.
your process.
There might be conversation, though, about something, even though someone doesn't pull it, they may be voting yes, but they may just want to have conversation.
Still give the opportunity.
You still have
But my
discussion.
question today was, I think you had said, hold any comments until the end.
Yep.
So you read all of those, M, N,
Yes, I did.
O. Should we be, I feel like, discussing M while we're in that section, rather than saying, okay, well, I have a comment on M1, I have a comment on 04. That may be so I don't know how we can work that, so that the comments are meaningful to when those topics are brought up.
Well, I can go slowly and someone can interrupt me when they want.
Oh, so you do want that to happen?
I don't know. I mean, we could.
Or you could say, here's all of M.
You haven't opened the floor for discussion
I
yet.
see.
That's,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the way I saw the process work tonight, you went through everything, then you took a motion
To open discussion.
for consent.
Right.
Yep.
And so you got a first, a second, now it's open for discussion and debate or whatever.
Okay.
So,
Or we could go M, you could open it for M, right? And say, these are for consent, any comments on M? Now, then you open it for N.
Well,
No?
there's only one consent vote
Right.
on the agenda, so either
So
you
you
just
can't
have to.
even discuss those
So, yeah,
items.
so you have to move it when,
well, you could have a number of consent votes.
you could do it by section, but that's.
Oh, I
do
see,
it
you'd
by
have to
section.
vote by
Yeah.
section
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
open it by section.
Right, so if you said personnel items 1 through 10, motion, second, discussion,
Got it.
boom.
But in board docs, they only allow you to have one consent vote.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I never
Yeah.
knew that.
so, because I had asked that too, because we used to vote in sections like
Blocks.
that,
Yeah.
blocks, yeah, but now it's one consent. So it either has to be, we
Really?
could always move the
Boards don't
consent and
operate
vote
that way.
up the actual resolution so that it moves all of the consents, and then you can just talk about the sections by section.
But that defeats the purpose of a consent agenda.
We're supposed to just be
Yeah,
stuff that we
I-
don't have discussion on.
Exactly. So if we're gonna pull it apart and have discussion on everything, we
Yeah.
might as well just make it a regular agenda item.
Exactly.
They won't be
So
here for
hopefully
2
there
days.
won't
So
be.
what, but there's no problem with, I don't think there's a problem, though, with talking about things that we're voting on. If we're spending $120,000 on technology, or that's an example, which
Right.
we didn't do tonight, but I'm just saying.
53,000.
It's nice to say to the community, just so everyone knows, this is about, and it's okay to have a conversation even if you're not, questioning
Then don't
something.
have a consent agenda. I mean, the whole point of a consent agenda is to accelerate. Our
The
job
time.
is to manage the business of the school district.
Yeah.
That's why we sit here.
Right.
So if we feel like, if we start to get into a place where we feel like we have to justify every single thing. I mean, I think if we have a consent agenda, the information is public and people can read it and it's fine. If it's extraordinary, sure, pull it off. But we'll never get done. We'll be
Yeah.
here till 3:00
And
in the morning.
I would make the same comment on committee reports, where we should be having them done in advance and submitted with the agenda so people can read them and we have copies and we can think about it and ask intelligent questions, and then give short summaries in the meeting. And, we're doing a lot of things in the meeting that probably could be done through the agenda, and we're still gonna let the public know because they'll be
Okay,
posted.
as long as we are
So-
transparent in
Yeah.
our thinking, yes.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Just a quick question. All of the items in the consent agenda where there are supporting documents, are those available to the public as well? So a member of the public, if they had a question, could raise that during open comment,
Yes.
and we could consider whether
Yes.
that made sense to pull it out of the consent agenda, to have the discussion that the public was asking for.
You wouldn't pull it out of the consent vote. I mean, you could, but you wouldn't just because, a question was asked, but you.
Right, but
Yeah.
you have an agenda public comment period before you get rolling on everything else. So those items in the consent are fair game for
Yep.
the public to
Yep,
comment on.
right.
And to your point, someone may bring up something and you say, you know what, we need to talk about that. Motion to pull that one separate, and then you keep moving, right? Okay? I think that's.
We have 5 minutes left, we have still
make
have
it page
half of it. We got to page 2.
Page 2 now, right?
Do we want to just call it and deal with the rest in another session? I think we're all done. We've been here a long time today. Thank you,
I
everybody.
move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Second? Second. Okay. Thank you, everyone.